there's no reason that your goofy or comic character has to derail the whole thing.
Yeah.
Or take up way too much time because, we still want to do stuff. Alex, I was going through some Reddit forums because I was bored. And,
Right.
And when I got over there, I was looking at some stuff about tabletop RPGs, and a question came up that was asked very recently. And it was about when you're trying to engage your players at the beginning of a session. And the question was, what creative and fun methods have you seen to help players remember important story events or characters between sessions?
Okay.
So, basically we're talking about, you get everybody around the table, you start talking about the, what happened during our last session, but you don't want to just address it as, tell me what you did. Okay. So how are we going to engage our players and try to figure out, collectively what we're going to be doing?
I mean, I don't think it has to be like super engaging, like fun. Like the fun is the game.
You don't want it to
itself.
be fun anyway.
No, I don't. I mean, I typically what I'll do is ask my players for a recap of what happened last session.
Right.
One way you can do this is if any player wants to take notes, for instance.
Sure.
It's like, all right, maybe if anyone takes notes, they can have a one of the tokens you give out in 5e.
Oh yeah. Inspiration?
Yeah. Thank you. That. Yeah. Maybe it's like, hey, anyone who takes notes, you get inspiration at the start of the game.
Sure.
Something like that. Give them a little incentive to remember the stuff, for instance.
Certainly.
Another thing you can do is maybe you have your players do a character journal, if they're into that.
Yes.
Your players, your characters could be journaling of what's going on and be like, all right, cool. Who remembers what's going on? What are your characters doing? How did we end off?
Sure.
I don't think it has to be super engaging or crazy, but having some put on the players to figure out what's going on, and to remember where we are at the end of a session is usually nice.
So in my game of 1879, Andy had put together this thing at the very beginning, which was you could optionally keep a character journal, like you were saying. Now, if you do that, you would get, for every session that you're keeping this up, 100 adventure points. Adventure points are basically the currency if you're familiar with either 1879 or Earth Dawn, which it was based off of. The ship of Theseus that it came out of, essentially. Adventure points are what you use for every kind of character advancement in the game.
Okay. Other systems just use EXP you can spend, for instance.
Certainly. In this particular system, you get these adventure points, and you could either use those to upgrade stats, skills, give yourself durability, a whole bunch of things like that. You would get 100 of those for every time that you did the journaling, and then we could make the journals public, and we put them onto a forum so anybody who wanted to follow along with the game could actually watch it. I found that was a really engaging thing, because now when I'm playing the session, I have to also start thinking like, oh, right, I got to take notes because I got my journal, and I got to put my journal together. And then
that sounds more like a job than fun for me, though.
That does feel like a job, but I do get adventure points for doing it, so it's kind of worth it, we're going to say. The thing is that I found really interesting is that other characters would be able to give their perspectives by putting their journal entries in too, for the ones who wanted it. We had 3 of us that were actually doing this. And so I'd go through the forums and I'd be able to read them publicly and see like how from their perspective they were looking at stuff. And a lot of times it would be stuff that I had forgotten about, like the stuff that maybe I wasn't really involved in a scene, so I hadn't been paying very close attention. They would write about those in detail and in depth. So I feel like that process gave me a lot better overall understanding of what we had just done for those few moments where and I hate to say this, sometimes I would tune out during some sessions. Especially when you go into a lot of digression and people are, off in the corner doing something and you're not there.
Yeah.
So that does
Well,
happen.
your character shouldn't know anything about that then.
Exactly. See, for me, my metagaming part of that is if my character's not in the scene, I probably should not actually be fully aware of what's going on because I'm not there. So,
Yeah.
on the one hand, I'm like, should I be paying attention because this might become relevant? Or should I not be paying attention because I'm not there?
Right.
That's a whole other conversation. But for this one, I was thinking about, you could do the journaling kind of thing. Depending on the kind of setting that you're doing, I think that trying to do something more in-game world would make sense. If you're trying to do like a campy sci-fi sort of setting, I think somebody even mentioned this as like a last week on, and just try to do one of those old 50s style sci-fi,
Captain's Log.
Captain's Log. Stardate. Yeah, do that for sci-fi settings or something like that. For if you've got somebody who's really musically inclined and is playing like a bard in your fantasy setting, have them do a poem recapping the whole thing. Make them do the work. Why should you? You have your players recap that. That actually does bring me to a question I'd like to ask, though. Do you think it is on the GM to remind the players of what happened, or should the players be the ones to remember what their characters have done?
I think the GM needs to be aware of things and make sure they know what's going on, but I also think players should be invested enough in the game to not put all the work on the GM like that.
Right.
If you're playing the game, you should be aware of what's going on, where you were, where you left off, things like that, because putting too many roles on the GM is something that parties do sometimes.
Yes.
Maybe not as much as they used to.
Yeah.
But I know, before I've GM'd a game, been like, all right, I need to get the group together. I need to schedule it all out. I need to remember all the stuff, make the game, do everything, and the players just come and play.
Right.
And it's it's a lot. It's a lot of work to do, and it's not always, I feel, like a fair workload distribution.
Yeah.
It's like, if we're all here to have fun, we should all be doing a little bit of this work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, the GM's going to make the world and tell the story or whatever like that, but I think the players can offload some of the difficulty. Either a player can bring snacks, or a player can set the group up for whenever you're going to play, do the scheduling stuff, or maybe a player can do the recap,
Right.
Everyone has a role in the party, everyone also has a role at the table.
Right. If we're going to treat a role-playing game like a collaborative world-building or storytelling experience, then it makes sense to have everybody actively engaged in remembering what that story is and keeping tabs on it. I think that that's not a huge ask for people, especially if you're playing the game. I mostly say all of this because when I start running a game, I'm just letting everybody know I'm probably not going to remember exactly what all of your characters did. I'm hoping that you do. Or that other players remember what your character did in relation to it. So hopefully that's true. I would say that something that was helpful is if we had an open Google Doc for some of the play sessions that I've had, where people can write notes collectively. All of the players can come in and they can write notes in their own script or in their own color, so that we can keep track of that a little bit better. And I think just from trying to keep everybody on the same page and remember what everybody else remembers kind of framework, I think that that's probably a good thing. Technology helps when you're doing that online. If you don't actively have a journal. I don't know if that's necessarily fun or creative, as the question asks, but I think that it can be cohesive, it can be helpful to remember what's going on.
I don't think it has to be fun, I think it has to be useful.
Yeah.
It has to be non-intrusive and useful and just easy to get players to do.
I would also say it should probably be fairly quick and efficient.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because I have been in sessions where it feels like half the session is going over crap that we had previously done.
Yeah.
Before you actually get into the session. That has a lot to do with digression as well, where everybody just kind of keeps riffing off of the stuff that you did and why, and get into the weeds, and then it's like, yeah, but you're not playing the game. I gotta wait like an hour before we can play the game. And then
I had somebody the other day say somebody I work with that doesn't play D&D or hasn't, but it's like, I want to learn.
Yep.
And I'm not really into the habit of teaching newbies right now. So, but they're like, if we ever play D&D, I want to have one of this goofy shit. And it's like, no, if I wanted to play goofy shit, I'd play with goofy people.
There really has not been a campaign or a game that I played that I didn't end up being a little bit wacky.
Wacky players are fine.
I'm a wacky guy. I mean,
wacky
played.
Characters are fine.
You've played with me. You've seen Max. Max, I would consider to be kind of a wacky character, kind of a goofy character.
Weird. He's a little strange.
A little more of a comic relief kind of character. But there's no reason that your goofy or comic character has to derail the whole thing.
Yeah.
Or take up way too much time because, we still want to do stuff. So I would say for recapping and all of that, I don't really want to do anything that's more than like 10 minutes for a recap. 5-10 minutes should be pretty easy to just kind of remind people where they're at. Hopefully you know where your characters, like the individual players, know more or less what their character's at. If they're actively engaged, they should be able to do that. If they're not remembering what their character did, that's a bigger problem. Because it makes me think that they're not actually engaging very well with the story or what the campaign is. And that might be something to address.
Yeah.
That's something to just kind of like keep in the back of your head. Because again, just reminding everybody, my intention is later in the year to actually try to do, run a game of some kind. And when that happens, I will get very, very nervous if people don't know what their own characters are or do. It will make me very concerned. I guess the question that I'll ask you, and by transitory properties, the rest of the people watching this is, what questions should you be asking your players at the beginning of the session to kind of get this whole ball rolling? What question would you ask of them?
I feel like the questions you'd want to ask are, all right, where are your characters, or what are your characters doing right now? Or say, all right, where did we leave off?
Yeah. Where in the story? What chapter marker are we in? Right?
As long as you don't leave off a session in media res,
Yes.
I feel like you shouldn't do that. Don't leave off in the middle of an action scene.
Sounds a bad idea.
I mean, you can if there's a lull in the action, like if you're doing a big thing and it's like, all right, you're taking a 5-minute breather between this sneaking section you've done and the next section in this dungeon, for instance. But like, don't be like, all right, we're in the middle of combat and break. You don't do that.
Yeah.
But
but
something like where are we? What are we doing? What's going on?
Yeah. Also, an even worse idea, just in general, is don't break a session in the middle of a flashback.
I feel like somebody did this at one point.
No, but probably somebody did. But I was just thinking when you were talking about like in media res, where it'd be like a moment out of time, like that kind of thing. Somebody at some point I can just see, like in the middle of a character's flashback, completely out of time from the rest of the game, said, okay, well, that's all the time we have for tonight, so we're gonna have to pick this back up.
What I think would be a great way to start and end sessions would be if each session took either the place of like one day or like a period of time and ended at when the players are going to bed.
Oh, okay.
And then started again when they were waking up.
Yep. Starting and ending at the beginning and end of your day does make sense.
Yeah, because then you could be like, all right, so it's the beginning of the morning, you know, good morning. You've woken up to the sunshine. You can just start everything like it's a new day. Like,
And you have a to-do list.
yeah. But the problem is
Your
with
chores.
that is then the session before you would have had to do all the things you need to do and been like, all right, I'm going to bed. You couldn't end in any action sequences. You couldn't end if you're not camping. It's like, all right, we have these things, we're doing them, and like you can decide when you want to stop, but you need to find a place to rest.
Right.
Kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is doable. It's probably not as convenient as it sounds for a lot of game sessions.
Depending on how much you want to do in a day.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a single day. It could be like, all right, you're spending like a month traveling, so it's like,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Yeah, so the question that I'm passing along for this is just what would you ask your players to start with, and do you have a creative way of, actually engaging people at the start of a session? And I'm mostly just going to crib whatever you say so that I can use it myself. So feel free to give me ideas, and that will be the idea ship of Theseus that we go on for this one.
There you go.
These all tie in together now.